Hello peeps, welcome back to Big Deck Player. We are back to our usual programming schedule for this series now. Blackrock Mountain is all done and dusted, we got our heroic card back. So we're going to be looking at decks that you can play in Ranked. Back to how it used to be. So without further ado, we're taking a look at a Paladin deck. Okay, so this is the deck. This is the deck that I've been using recently, and it's quite a lot of fun. It's different from what we normally see Paladins playing. It has got some of the staple cards that you'd expect to see, but then it's got some new ones. It's got a couple from the previous expansion, it's got some from Blackrock Mountain, and it's got some old classics. So let's take a look. So we start off, because this is called Watcher Paladin, we start off with two Ancient Watchers. Unusual to see in a Paladin deck. Normally you'd probably only really see that in a Warlock deck, but here it is. And as such, we've got ways and means to use the Ancient Watcher to our advantage. The next card is the Ironbeak Owl. Again, using this to our advantage to silence the Ancient Watcher so it can attack is a possibility. But you have two silences, so maybe you don't want to use your silences on the Ancient Watcher. Maybe you want to use them on your opponent's cards for better trades against stuff like piloted shredders. So we've got two silences, so that's pretty good, because most decks, sometimes they run one silence, sometimes they don't run any, and we've got two, so that's quite useful. We also have two Nerubian Eggs. Again, quite unusual to see in a Paladin deck, but with the rest of the cards in this deck, it makes perfect sense. We have two Coghammers. Now this is a great card if you've turn 2 played your Ancient Watcher and you've got your 4/5 minion out on the board that can't attack. Turn 3, you use your Coghammer, giving your Ancient Watcher Divine Shield and Taunt. Which means it doesn't matter that it can't attack, because nothing can get through until it's dealt with a 4/5 taunt on turn 3 with Divine Shield. So that's a pretty nice combo. Pretty nice indeed. Plus you've got a weapon that does 2 damage over 3 turns, so that's not bad either. We also have two Aldor Peacekeepers, one of the old classics from the Paladin decks. Always useful, especially late game when your opponent starts bringing out bigger and badder cards. Reducing its attack to 1 is also very useful. A big game hunter, because you never know when you're not going to have an Aldor Peacekeeper in your hand, then you need to get rid of Dr. Boom, basically, or Ragnaros, or any other big, horrible, scary creature. So, big game hunter is pretty useful. I mean, obviously we've got the two silences as well, so if it's a buffed minion, you can always silence it. But a big game hunter will get rid of it completely, so that's pretty useful. We have two Scarlet Purifiers. Now, this is one that you don't see very often at all in Paladin decks. And this deals 2 damage to all minions with Death Rattle on its battle cry. So this is why you want the Nerubian Eggs, because obviously Nerubian Eggs only have 2 health and they have Death Rattle. So Scarlet Purifiers are a really nice trigger to get your 4/4 Nerubians from your Nerubian Eggs. Also it does damage to all minions with Death Rattle, so you need to be a bit careful, because there are some other creatures in this deck that have Death Rattle that you might not want to do damage to. But it will do damage to your opponent's creatures as well. So if they have Leper Gnomes, it will get rid of those. The only thing you might want to bear in mind is, obviously, if your opponent has Nerubian Eggs, you might not want to give your opponent a 4/4 Nerubian, so you might want to silence it instead. At 4 mana we have a Consecration. Deals 2 damage to all enemies. This is a great card, and one of the classic Paladin cards. Gets used virtually every Paladin deck I've ever played, I think, because it's a great board clear. Also at 4 mana we have 2 Defender of Argus. So if you don't have your Ironbeak Owls, or you don't have your Coghammers to buff your Ancient Watcher, then you have 2 Defender of Argus, which can also do it. Also you can use these on the Nerubian Eggs as well to make them into taunts making your opponent have to go into them first, spawning your 4/4 Nerubians. Also, it can be used to get a little bit of extra damage out should you need to trade with something. So, all in all, Defender of Argus is a pretty strong card. Don't see it get used as much as it used to recently, but I think it's still a pretty awesome card nonetheless. Also at 4 mana we have 2 piloted shredders, 4/3 for 4, plus you get the random 2-cost minion when they die. It's a great card. Really, really great card. I think this is the only problem with these is obviously sometimes they can get silenced, which makes their value go down a little bit, but they're still a pretty solid card. Now for a new card, Solemn Vigil, which is, I believe it was from Blackrock Mountain Paladin class challenge. So you draw 2 cards, and they cost, and this card costs 1 less for each minion that died this turn. So you kind of want to play your minions and stuff first, get them, kill off anything on your opponent's side, or just after maybe a consecration if you've just had a board clear, or maybe Scarlet Purifier's just gone out and it's killed up a bunch of different things with its battle cry, reducing the cost of the Solemn Vigil. You can normally get it down to like 1 or 2 mana in a turn, which is pretty nice. So getting 2 cards for 2 mana, it's not too bad. I think the Mage's Arcane Intellect is 3 mana for 2 cards, so if you can get it below 3 mana, then I think you're going to get value from that card. Also at 5 mana we have an Antique Healbot, which restores 8 health to your hero. I quite like using Antique Healbot on turns against mages when I think they might be playing a Mirror Entity secret, because a 3/3 is a 3/3 for 5 for you is the purpose of this card is not in the stats, it's in the restoring 8 health. So the 3/3 is not too difficult to get rid of. So I sometimes play this because obviously they don't get the benefit of the battle cry, they just get the 3/3 minion. And you could normally get rid of a 3/3 minion relatively easily. So yeah, sometimes I like to play that if I think they've got a Mirror Entity. At 5 mana we also have 2 Sludge Belchers. Probably the best taunt in the game, just because it's so sticky. And not just because it's a Sludge Belcher and the sludge is probably sticky, but also because you have to go through a 3/5 taunt and then you have to go through a 1/2 taunt before you can actually go anywhere else. So Sludge Belchers are always going to be good, and they're always in these decks, always. Also at 5 mana, and the last card at 5 mana, we have 2 Spectral Knights. Again, not one that you normally see in Paladin decks. In fact, I very rarely see Spectral Knights get used at all, which is a shame because I think it's a fantastic card. A 4/6 for 5 is pretty good. It's not easy to get rid of, especially as it can't be targeted by spells or hero powers, which means you put that out, mages can't fireball it unless they get silenced, but then they've got to use a silence and a fireball to get rid of it, which in my opinion is quite good value. And obviously you can then use this in conjunction with like a Defender of Argus, making it a 5/7 with taunt that can't be targeted with spells or hero powers, and suddenly, you know, it's going to trade 2, maybe 3 for 1, and that's fantastic value. At 6 mana we have Sylvanas Windrunner. Now this is another one that you want to be careful of if you're going to be playing your Scarlet Purifiers, because you don't really want Sylvanas to take more damage than she needs to, unless, of course, she is already down to 2 health and you need to get hold of whatever your enemy has put out on the board. And then comboing it with Scarlet Purifier is actually quite an effective way to take control of an enemy minion. So that's a possible combo. At 7 mana, the obvious Dr. Boom. I don't really need to say much more about him. It's a 7/7 with 2 1/1 boom bots. It's fairly standard, almost every deck seems to play Dr. Boom, which is why you need a big game hunter. At 8 mana we have Lay on Hands for extra health and extra card draw. So we've got Antique Healbot for health and Lay on Hands for health, and we've got the Solemn Vigil for card draw, Lay on Hands for card draw. You shouldn't run out of cards in this deck. You should be pretty good for card draw in this deck. And then last but not least, we have Tyrion Fordring. 6/6 taunt with Divine Shield, and when he dies, gives you a 5/3 Ashbringer. Again, this one has Death Rattle, so don't put him out and while he's still got his Divine Shield, then use a Scarlet Purifier, because that would be a really silly thing to do. So that's the deck. That is the Watcher Paladin deck. I've been having a lot of fun with this deck. I like playing decks that are a little different, that aren't always just what's being played in the meta. They're not Face Hunters or Mech Mages or Zoolocks. I like finding ones that are a little different, and as I say, this is a very different Paladin deck. You don't see these cards getting played in many decks at all most of the time, especially Scarlet Purifier. I think this is the first deck I've ever seen Scarlet Purifier getting used, and I'm having a fun with this. I'm having a lot of fun with this. So I suggest that you follow the link that I put in the description, which will take you to hearthstone.com, so you can check out this deck for yourself. Go over there, give it a plus rating. I think it's a really fun deck, and I think you should try it out. Let me know how you get on. If you make any videos of using this deck, feel free to link them to me and I will check them out. If you have any suggestions for decks that you would like me to feature on Big Deck Player, again, feel free to link them to me and I will be sure to check them out. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next week for some more Big Deck Player. Thanks again. Bye bye.